Welcome Representative Congressman Mike Levin.
Welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us at our 88th Town Hall. Can you believe it? I want to start by giving a special shout out to our whole team, to Misty and Jeremy and all our campaign, all our folks that are here. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Can we give them a round of applause? And I also want to give a special thanks to my amazing wife, Chrissy, who is here. Love you, sweetie. I cannot do what I do at all, but for my incredible wife. So truly grateful that you're here. Before we begin our town hall, we've got some very special guests to hear from. And I'd especially like to thank them for coming on a Saturday. They are here. They are just the best of the best. Our brave firefighters who have been on. They have been on the front line specifically of the coastal fire that erupted in Laguna, Niguel this week. Our firefighters, I think we all know, are true heroes. And they go to work each and every day to keep us safe. So with that, I'd like to introduce the Incident Commander, Ron Roberts, with the Orange County Firefighters Fire Authority, to give us a brief update on the coastal fire. He will also introduce everybody else that's here from OCFA.
Thank you for the kind applause and the warm welcome. My name is Ron Roberts, and as the Congressman said, I am the Incident Commander of the Incident Management Team that is in place managing the. With me is our Liaison Officer and one of your neighbors, Chief Rob Capobianco. Over there, next up is Chief Mike Contreras, who is.
They're all very shy.
He is your local fire chief here for the city of Laguna, Niguel. Next to him is my boss, our boss, the operations chief of the department, Chief T.J. McGovern. Next to Chief McGovern is our public information officer for the incident management team, Captain Tang Nguyen. Next to Tang is our OCFA's one of the wildland fire defense planners and inspectors, and I believe program manager, Nick Pivera. And last but not least, a longtime friend of mine, I think we've known each other almost 30 years, the current president of the Orange County Professional Firefighters Local 3631, Todd Baldridge. So just a quick update for you all. Obviously, you're aware there was a fire. Started on Wednesday afternoon, approximately 2:45 in the afternoon. Fire actually started in the city of Laguna Beach. And once we got fire units there, the fire was doing what it does. We know it does in the wildland. It burns up. And it burned up the hill where the winds, you remember we were experiencing some pretty heavy onshore winds that day. Picked that fire up, crossed Aliso Canyon on us, and took it up that hill towards the homes in Coronado Point and Laguna Niguel. At its height, we had Chief Capo Bianco was the incident commander. I assume command from him. I'm sure he could probably give you a little more finite detail as to what was going on at the time. But we are lucky in this area. We have resources that we can reach out to other departments as well as our own and get those here. Driving time, of course, is one of the reflex factors. I can tell you at its height, we had every piece of fixed wing aircraft in the region, which is basically Fresno South to the state border. So we had it all, including helicopters, large helicopters, smaller helicopters. So we were lucky enough that if you can say that, this was an early season fire, Not everybody was busy, so we were able to get all that equipment here. We had numerous firefighters, several hundred firefighters on the line. We continue to have a strong presence, although luckily the mitigation is starting to ramp down a little bit. We're able to send those long firefighters with long driving trips back to Santa Barbara, back to Ventura. We're able to start releasing those and get them home. Luckily today we were able to accomplish some more repopulation, so we're excited to be able to get folks back in their homes. I know that's probably a concern, but please understand we just ask for patience because we have to make sure that the infrastructure can support the repopulation. Can we get power? Can we get water, gas? Can we have those things ready when we say go? So that's what takes some time. The damaged area will probably be remaining closed for quite a few more days, but we're going to do our best with the city. We're hand in hand with the city and our sheriff's officer partners, sheriff's department. So we're working hard to get that area back open, but it's going to take some time. As you can imagine, the damage is unfortunately very extensive. Chief Capo, do you want to take a second?
Sure, I guess I can speak a little bit. I was one of the first, I was there fairly early in the fire. We had a 2-alarm fire in Dana Point that many of your resources came straight from that fire, completely unrelated to the fire in Laguna, Niguel. Our initial response was down into the canyon. We came in through the golf course as well as through the Laguna Niguel side through the county park. Initially with the winds down in the canyon, it was pushing up canyon almost towards Aliso Viejo and the park headquarters. And our intentions were we threw all of our resources down into the canyon because of the steep slopes that you see. I wanted to fight that fire in the canyon where it's flat. The winds were less down in the canyon. We threw all of our resources, everything we had at it down in the canyon. Despite the efforts we were making, during our firefight, we looked up and we saw a small spot, we call it spot fire, about midway up the slope below the homes in Laguna Niguel. Immediately put a helicopter on it to try to keep that spot to where we could catch it. And at that exact same time is when we started sending heavy resources up to the homes above. So our air tankers did their best to hold it on that slope. When you get a steep slope and a sustained 25-mile-an-hour wind behind it, it's difficult to say the least, but I can tell you right now I'm very proud of our men and women that were in the streets up there. They saved a tremendous number of homes. That fire was going from home to home, catching in the vegetation between streets. They were going 1, 2, 3 streets down. It was stacked up against them, but I'm very proud of the efforts that they made up top and the conditions. We've all seen the videos from the news and on Instagram and that type of thing. So it could have been much, much worse. That being said, I wish we could have done more. We always think that. But that's a little bit about what I saw when I first got there.
One of the questions we were asked quite often was what can the community do? What more can we do? We appreciate your support. We feel your love. We feel your warmth. Just like to say that in a wind-driven fire like this, the biggest thing that we can ask is when we ask you to leave, please leave. That's the only way in a wind-driven fire we can save lives, is to just have folks leave. I know leaving your home is not what you want to do because as you can see, it could take some time to get back, but we're doing our best, and so that's what we would ask. Do we want to go to questions, or do you want? Okay, and are going to want Chief Contreras and probably Nick Piveroff, who's in charge of wildland defense, to probably. I imagine there's probably questions for them. So.
Just a quick shout out. I happened to chat with a woman today who works at a senior center in Laguna Niguel, and she was very concerned with her plants. And so she reached out to the fire department with a list of names, and she got someone closed the loop and gave her a rundown. These people are not there. These and to give her peace of mind, and just major shout out to you guys. The communication and command and control, really awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir.
I'm hoping you can clarify something for me that I heard on the news, some speculation that the firefighting effort was hampered a little bit by the fact that the planes dropping retardant or water or whatever had to go a long ways to refill themselves, that there wasn't really a airfield close by. And I'm wondering if either that or if you have other ideas for ways that the air part of the battle can be improved.
You want to take that, or you want me to?
Our firefighting efforts were not hampered. So we do have resources. CAL FIRE and the Forest Service operate our fixed-wing aircraft. There are air bases strategically located throughout the state and even the country. Those air bases, and so it's not just any airport. Remember they dropped the Phos-Chek. It's kind of that pink gel-like material. There's air bases that have a tremendous amount of infrastructure to where they can land, quickly refill with the Phos-Chek, and then be able to return. So those are national and state resources that are strategically spread out throughout the state. We, like Chief Roberts said, we had all of the fixed-wing air resources for firefighting in Southern California at our fire. There was no delay in their response. Yes, their air bases are in Ramona,
Hemet, Foxfield up in Lancaster. So in the LA Basin, no. Outside the LA Basin, well, I guess nothing in the LA Basin available for refill.
So our rotary wing helicopters come from local, as well as we're backed up by resources from Riverside and even San Bernardino. So there's an entire system in place for getting our highly coveted air resources on fires. There was no delay with what we saw, whether it's the Emerald Fire, the Jim Fire, or this fire. Everything was in place. We were the only fire in the region. We weren't competing for resources. But it does take a tremendous amount of infrastructure to be able to support and refill those airplanes at the bases they're at. They can't just land at John Wayne Airport and make some material. It takes that infrastructure to be able to support them.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hi. Yeah, you did a great job on jumping on that quickly, considering the conditions, so thank you. Is there something we can do to bring into our communities like a Firewise program or something like that, where,
Absolutely.
you know, it secure the eaves, at least get vegetation off the houses, especially the rooftops, thin out things?
There's two programs out there. There's the Fire Safe Council, which is a nonprofit 501c3. It's a grassroots approach, homeowners doing the work, being on the board and making changes in the community. And then Firewise, like you mentioned, is another program that speaks to vegetation management, because there's two things we're talking about always when we talk about wildland fire prevention is vegetation management or defensible space, and then the most important is home hardening. So the eaves, the windows, the doors, the decks, and things like that. AB 3074 is a new bill that's coming out in regards to the 5-foot zone. And so a lot of research and data has shown that when the ember hits the house, it goes up in the eaves or goes down, and that 5-foot zone is very important. And so we have a great website for everyone to go to. I actually have some handouts. We offer up a free home assessment. We'll come out and we'll educate you, or if you don't want us out there, you can go to our website, you can do it on your own. It's a self-taught kind of a program that you can do on your own.
Is there a way to do that kind of community-wide? Because if our house is secure and the one next to us, but the other two houses aren't.
You're absolutely right. It's a community involvement. It's got to be the community. So we have the Hilltoppers. There's a bunch of folks up at the top of the hill that we've done HOAs on Monarch Summit, a bunch of HOAs that we've done outreaches for. But if we want to do I'm looking at Chief. If we want to do an outreach.
No, and we do, you know, I cover Laguna Niguel, Laguna Hills, kind of both sides of the freeway. Both have wildland interface. So we try to do it twice a year, usually at the end of fire season, kind of beginning. And I say that as in we say there is no fire season, but we try to catch them on both sides. And we'll do an outreach. We've partnered with the city of Laguna Niguel and invited everybody in with the HOAs, the residents, and do that. I would expect we're going to be doing a lot more of them here. I mean, we already had them scheduled, but we will be doing more, not only in the city, but probably department-wide.
Great, thank you, because I know I've mentioned it at our HOA, but I think people just don't understand. We
They
can do
don't-
things.
They don't really realize it until the day after, like we are right now.
Thank you.
How about time for one more? You get the last word in the back row. Go right ahead.
I had a question for you with the water departments doing rebates for turf removal. A lot of the communities are engaging in that, and we've been hearing that when the lawns are taken up and the native plants are put in, a lot of places are putting in dry mulch and mulch right up against the structures of the homes. And I'm wondering, I've heard that can really smolder, and I wonder what you think about that.
Speaking to that AB 3074 again with the mulch, there shouldn't be any mulch within 5 feet of your house at all. And a good example of that is Clubhouse and Pacific Island Drive. The Niguel Summit HOA, through our education and efforts, if you look at the top of that slope where all that old acacia, that 20-year acacia has been removed, you can see where the fire spotted into that mulch. So it is a problem, but we can manage it because if there is a small fire in the mulch, we need to prevent it from getting into the ground cover or shrubs, and that's the issue. So that's the education that we need to get out, and I'll leave these over here. If you want to pick one up, give us a ring. We'll come out and talk.
Can we please just give a huge round of applause? Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you, that was incredible. Thank you.
Oh, we got a microphone.
We've come up with a microphone.
There you go.
Does it work? How are we?
Testing? Nope.
Yeah.
Little intermission.
You can go ahead and start now. This is where you sing and dance, right?
Yeah, I'll let you do that.
Okay, now.
How about now? Hey, that's great. Fantastic. Got to improvise a little bit. Well, again, we just want to make sure that we thank our firefighters. I had a chance a couple weeks ago to go on a ride-along with some of our firefighters in San Juan Capistrano. They do extraordinary work each and every day, and I think we just have to be mindful of how hard they're working, how much they do for our community, and when you go on that ride-along, you certainly recognize that. But particularly at this time, they're just the best of the best. So I want to now introduce another very special guest, somebody that I've known for a very long time, Orange County Supervisor Katrina Foley, who is joining us here today. And Katrina is the first woman Democrat to be elected to the Orange County Board of Supervisors ever. And she's going to need your support on June 7th, which is right around the corner. Katrina Foley, everybody.
Thank you, Congressman. It is a pleasure to be here and to be able to soon serve with you in partnership. I want to thank you for all the work that you're doing for Orange County every day. And of course, we have to thank our Orange County Fire Authority, all of the mutual aid agencies that helped. And I just want to tell a quick story about, we talk about firefighting, but they do more than that. There were a couple stories that came out where the firefighters were quick to think that, oh, this family photo and this laptop would probably be precious to people who weren't there when the fire started. So they grabbed them. Somebody was, saved someone's family cat. I mean, that's the kind of caring people that we have working for Orange County, and we're so grateful. I want to thank you because the county benefits from the federal work that the congressman is doing. He helped to pass the American Rescue Plan, and as a result, Orange County took that funding, more than $600 million. Yes, thank you, Mr. Congressman. We took that funding, we fed people who were food insecure, more than 750,000 residents. We gave business recovery grants. We helped to start to build a Be Well Center, a wellness center for mental health crisis and addiction treatment, vaccines, testing, PPE, helping the homeless shelters with the protocols necessary and the healthcare necessary during the pandemic, and so much more. I just can't say enough about the work that you're doing for us as a county, and I really look forward to partnering with you on veterans issues, climate action in this area. Thank you for your work on coastal erosion and sand replenishment. We have a coastal erosion problem from Seal Beach all the way down to San Clemente. So I'm grateful for the work that you do, and it's great to stand with you. Thank you all for having me.
I can't wait to serve with Katrina Foley. And well, it is fantastic to be in Laguna Niguel today. This is part of the new 49th Congressional District. And to begin our town hall, I think, because a lot of you will hopefully be new constituents come January, just to briefly introduce myself. So by background, I'm an environmental attorney. I was a clean energy advocate. I grew up here in South Orange County. Back then it was El Toro. Today it's Lake Forest. I wanted to raise our family here as well. My wife and I have two young kids, 9 and 8 years old, going to Capo Unified schools in the 4th and 2nd grade. And I have tried to serve in Congress. I first got elected in 2018. I've tried to serve with two very basic principles in mind. First is accountability and transparency. As I mentioned to you, this is my 88th town hall. Earlier today, we had a house party in Dana Point. It was our 246th house party, I believe. And so that is, I think, why you do this job. Representative is not only my job title, it is my job description. My grandma used to tell me I had 2 ears, 1 mouth, use them accordingly. And I try to do that. I don't always succeed. So we started doing these town halls in person when I started once a month. I committed to doing 1 town hall a month for as long as I had the honor of serving. Then in early 2020, when COVID hit, we started doing them virtually. And hopefully there are quite a few people watching right now on Twitter or Facebook or YouTube. Grateful to Jeremy for his help live streaming virtually all of these. So the first principle, again, transparency, accountability. You might not always agree with my position on every issue, but at least you're going to know where I stand. The second principle is working across the aisle and trying to get things done for this district first. I'm proud to have brought Democrats and Republicans together to have passed and gotten signed into law 19 pieces of legislation. If you come to my office, you will see bills signed by the last president and bills signed by this president. I think it's important to work not only at the federal level, but also with our state leaders, our local leaders, to try to bring however many resources we can back to the community. And I'm proud to have helped deliver hundreds of millions of dollars to support many significant projects in our community. And of course, one of those partnerships I'm most proud of is, in fact, with our firefighters. I'll keep working with them and our law enforcement however I can. I also want to mention that I'm very hopeful that you will take the time because we all have firefighters, law enforcement officers, teachers, nurses, those on the front line every day working hard to better our community. I just hope, if nothing else, you'll take the time this next week just to thank somebody for their work. Can you do that for me? Just thank them. So I'm looking forward to answering everybody's questions. That's why we do this. It helps me. It informs me as I go back to Washington. But I just want to provide a few brief updates, if that's okay. I know that the issue that's top of mind for many is the future of women's health care in this country. And the reality is that your member of Congress is going to be confronted with the fact that the Supreme Court will have overturned the half-century precedent of Roe versus Wade and given states the power to outlaw abortion. And also that some are already using this draft decision to advocate for a nationwide ban. And with the June 7th primary coming up in just over 3 weeks, I think ballots, hopefully you've already gotten your ballots, I believe very strongly and hopefully you agree, that you have a right to know where the candidates stand before you vote. Fair enough?
Yes.
So let me be crystal clear about where I stand. I will always, always, always stand for women's health, including access to contraception and the right to make her own reproductive choices. Full stop. I believe that only a woman, her family, and her doctor should be able to decide what is best for her health, and I'll keep fighting to protect that right at the federal level. And while the Senate's failure to pass the Women's Health Protection Act, which would have codified Roe, is extremely frustrating, that won't stop me from doing all I can to continue to try to codify the protections established under Roe. Let me also say that to date, and those of you who have been attending these town halls or watching them online, you will know, or if you've been to any of our events, I have been very reluctant to engage any of my opponents by name. But I think it's important that you know where they stand also. And I'm going to highlight just two of them. One of my opponents, Christopher Rodriguez, not only supports the repeal of Roe, but he wants to go even further and outlaw all abortion at the national level. He recently tweeted, and I quote, "Roe versus Wade exists because Congress has failed to define when human life begins. I vow to author a bill that will define human life as beginning in the womb and therefore protected by the United States Constitution." Now, I profoundly disagree with Christopher on this, but I give him credit for having the courage of his convictions. On the other hand, one of my other opponents, Brian Marriott, has taken no public position whatsoever on repealing Roe versus Wade. He's in the past supported narrowing Roe, but now he has gone out of his way to avoid answering specific questions about his position on abortion. In fact, he's made no public comment at all on the Supreme Court case to repeal Roe. Most recently, he said, and I quote, "I don't comment on anything that's leaked," which, if you ask me, is a poor excuse. Because you have a right to ask candidates seeking your vote where they stand, myself included, particularly on an issue as important as this. And you have a right to get an honest answer. I don't expect anyone in here to agree with me on every issue. That includes my lovely wife, who frequently disagrees with me. But at least you have a right to know where I stand. So that's what you'll get from me. Fair enough? All right. Another issue that's top of mind for me is the war in Ukraine. And as you might know, Congress took additional action this week in response to Russia's unjustified and horrific attack. We in the House passed strong bipartisan legislation to provide an additional $40 billion in military and humanitarian aid for Ukraine. And it's currently being held up in the Senate by one senator. Anybody know who? Rand Paul. You all knew. You all knew. That's impressive. But I am confident, based on what I have heard, that it will get to the president's desk hopefully this next week. The United States and our allies are imposing severe and ongoing costs on Russia, which will leave it weakened in every way. The measures that we've taken with unprecedented speed and coordination, and by the way, we continue to add to those measures every day, they are devastating Russia, not only financially, but also militarily and strategically. The fight in Ukraine is about more than just Ukraine. It is a fight for global democracy. And make no mistake, democracy will prevail. Democracy must prevail. It must prevail. I'd also like to talk about our economy. And despite what you may read, we actually have a lot of news to be grateful for. We added 428,000 jobs last month, building on a very strong recovery. The economy has now recovered nearly 95% of the jobs lost at the height of the pandemic. That includes 8.3 million jobs created since President Biden took office. In fact, there have been only 3 months over the last 50 years, think of that, when our unemployment rate was lower than it is today. Thanks to the American Rescue Plan and our successful vaccination program, 75% of adult Americans are vaccinated, and 99% of schools have reopened. And I think they've all reopened here, and I can tell you, when our local elementary school reopened, there was probably few families happier than ours after our kids had a year on Zoom. That being said, we obviously have much more work that we have to do. So let's start with gas prices. Driving here, I saw it was around $6.10, $6.20, and I know we're all feeling pain at the pump, and I think we should be using every tool at our disposal to bring gas prices down. That being said, I also know that this is a much more complex problem than the political pundits would lead you to believe. To understand what I think we need to do, I think it's important we first unpack the main causes for gas prices themselves. I call them the 3 Ps. Hopefully you can remember these: pandemic, Putin, and price gouging. Can you remember that? Yeah. Pandemic, Putin, and price gouging. First, the pandemic. In January 2020, California gasoline was about $3.50 a gallon, and crude oil was at around $60. Then the pandemic hit. We all stayed home. We stopped driving. Oil prices plummeted. By April 2020, a barrel of oil was around $15. Gasoline went below $2.80 a gallon. You don't remember that because we were all stuck at home. Then, because of the vaccines and progress on the pandemic, we started traveling again. Demand went sky high, and supply hasn't been able to keep up. So before the invasion of Ukraine, gas was at about $4.70 a gallon. Then with the invasion, that's the second P, is Putin, gasoline has gone up another roughly $1.50 per gallon. Well, only 3% of our crude oil imports come from Russia. We know that oil and other fossil fuels are global commodities, and the ban on imports from Russia has dramatically impacted global prices. By the way, it's also a reason that your electric bills have gone up, because of the amount that we rely on natural gas to generate electricity. As for the third P, price gouging. This past week I had dinner with a friend of mine, Republican legislator from a big oil and gas producing state. I'd say who it was, but he'd be mad at me. I'd probably hurt him with his favorability in his district. But I asked him, can you show me any evidence that the oil companies are not price gouging? In fact, I've been asking my colleagues that for months, and they have no evidence. But I have the following. Last year, Exxon reported $23 billion in profit, its highest total since 2014. Chevron reported its most profitable year since 2014 with $15.6 billion in net income in 2021. In the meantime, big oil companies are focusing on stock buybacks, executive compensation, and jacking up their stock prices. That behavior continued in the first quarter of this year. Exxon and Chevron earned $5.5 billion and $6.3 billion respectively, and they both announced that they are boosting stock buybacks. So we're all paying, and they're doing stock buybacks. That's what's happening. Pandemic, Putin, price gouging. So what do we need to do about it? Well, not surprisingly, you got to address those 3 things, right? So pandemic, we talked about all the work that we're trying to do. We need to pass that supplemental, the COVID supplemental, to get additional boosters and to get the money for Paxlovid and for antivirals. We have the idea of test to treat. So if you were to test positive, you go to your local Walgreens and test positive, right then and there could get antivirals. We need that funding, and we need to work together to get that across the finish line. Second, with Putin, I just mentioned what we're doing with regard to Ukraine, the money and the resources that we're spending both for humanitarian assistance and for military assistance. Third, this coming week, we'll be voting on a price gouging bill to empower the president to issue an energy emergency proclamation, making it unlawful to increase gas and home energy prices in an exploitative or excessive way. It's about time. It's about time. Here's the most important thing, not just in the near term, but in the medium to long term. We must reduce our dependence on fossil fuels and invest, yes, in energy independence, but in clean energy independence. I'm open to other ideas as well, but the benefits actually have to go to the average consumer. I also know that it's not just gasoline. Prices are high across the board. And despite wages that are rising for workers and strong economic growth, budgets for many are strained. It's absolutely vital that we use every tool at our disposal to bring down costs and to help the average American make ends meet. And I want you to know that we are working every single day in the House of Representatives to help Americans deal with rising costs. We're helping repair our supply chains and infrastructure to ease bottlenecks and make more here at home, including through the bipartisan infrastructure law. Recently, companies like Intel and GM have announced new manufacturing plants in the United States, and Congress needs to build on that by getting legislation like the Bipartisan Innovation Act, which we call the American Competes Act, in the House. There's now a conference committee that is meeting to get that Innovation Act across the finish line. Get it to the president's desk so we can strengthen supply chains, grow American manufacturing, and create good jobs. The president's also taken action to clear the backlog at ports, vigorously enforce antitrust law to spur competition in key sectors, and open the strategic oil reserves to lower gas prices. Now, the Fed, the Federal Reserve, I think we all know, plays the primary role in helping our economy achieve full employment and stable prices. The Fed provided extraordinary support during the pandemic, and it's appropriate and necessary for them to recalibrate that support, as Chair Powell, who was just reconfirmed for another 4 years, just said this past week. Again, this is an extremely complex issue. There is no silver bullet to fix it, but I am focused on the solutions that are necessary at our disposal, and we can do it. If we work together in particular, we can do it. So, since there are a lot of new people here, I want to shift gears for just a minute and talk about some of the results we've already achieved for our district. These are in no particular order, but they're an example of the types of projects I also hope to deliver for Laguna Niguel in the years to come. $1.87 million for improving pedestrian access to the beach at Doheny Village in Dana Point. $9.3 million to put more sand on the beaches in San Clemente. Over $370 million for improvements at Camp Pendleton. Over $500,000 in funding for patrol car cameras for the Oceanside Police. $1.7 million for a new fueling station for clean air hydrogen buses for the North County Transit District. Over $5 million in new pedestrian improvements in Carlsbad. $30.5 million to reduce beach erosion and prevent the bluff collapses in Encinitas and Solana Beach. $17.6 million for local water recycling and desalination projects in Dana Point and Oceanside. And $300 million to stop sewage pollution from the Tijuana River. And that doesn't include the literally hundreds of millions of dollars more we've delivered to our cities, our schools, our counties, and over 20,000 small businesses in this district. That's the type of results that we're going to deliver for Laguna Niguel in the years ahead. Finally, I want to provide just a couple other recent highlights. Since our last town hall meeting last month, I had the pleasure of hosting 2 cabinet secretaries in our district. First, I hosted the Veterans Affairs Secretary, Dennis McDonough. Can the veterans in the audience raise their hands? Can we give them a round of applause, please? I am proud to be the vice chair of the House Veterans Affairs Committee and the chair of the Economic Opportunity Subcommittee with jurisdiction over veterans' housing, homelessness, the GI Bill, transition assistance, and more. Secretary McDonough and I had a series of meetings with veterans and VA staff at the Oceanside VA Clinic and the San Diego VA Medical Center. And one of the things we celebrated was my legislation to rename the medical center after Jennifer Moreno, a highly decorated combat veteran from Afghanistan. With this legislation, I'm proud that the San Diego VA, now the Jennifer Moreno San Diego VA, is the first in the country to be named after a woman of color. For those that don't know, I'm the proud grandson of a World War II veteran. And while he has passed away, he's always in my heart. And to this day, he's looking over my shoulder, telling me never to forget serving our veterans just as well as they've served us. And it is my commitment to you for as long as I have the honor to serve that I will not stop until every veteran has the best health care possible, a place to live, and a brighter future. Second, I hosted the Energy Secretary, Jennifer Granholm, former governor of Michigan, and I hosted her at SONGS, the San Onofre nuclear generating station. She'd never seen the site before. I wanted her to see firsthand how important it is we get the waste off our beach as safely and quickly as we can. And she announced something very important there at SONGS, which is that for the first time, the federal government will actually compensate communities that are interested in taking spent nuclear fuel. This follows legislation that I introduced called the Spent Fuel Prioritization Act, because there are about 80 sites across 34 states with spent nuclear fuel in the country. And again, the problem is not the fuel at San Onofre as much as that's the symptom. The problem is we have nowhere to send it in the United States. So our bill, the Spent Fuel Prioritization Act, says that for all of the nation's nuclear waste, prioritize moving the waste from the sites with the highest seismic risk, the highest population density, and the biggest national security challenges. Guess what? We rank first, I think, for all three of those things. That's usually I like ranking first, but not so much in this instance. So we introduced this bill on a bipartisan basis, and my co-lead was Darrell Issa. Darrell Issa, you've heard of him, and it's proof that bipartisanship is alive and well. So we have a lot more work to do. We did get $40 million for the Department of Energy to issue a request for formal proposals so that these communities throughout the country could offer to host the waste. And of course, the Department of Energy needs to review all of those. It's not going to happen overnight, but for the first time in many, many years, we are finally making progress in a bipartisan way on this issue. Thank you. Lastly, I was proud this week to join a bipartisan group of colleagues to support the bipartisan Invest to Protect Act, which would help smaller police departments in my district and many others across the country keep our communities safe. I've seen how this issue has pushed many into their ideological corners. I think that's a shame. We can do better than that. We can support law enforcement and improve policing at the same time. In fact, I strongly believe those two principles go hand in hand. If we want to make law enforcement better, defunding police is not the answer. I've never supported that. I never will. Instead, I believe we should increase funding for police in a way that helps them stay safe, do their jobs more effectively, and continue to earn the trust of the communities they serve. And at a time when law enforcement agencies, particularly smaller ones, are under-resourced, where budgets have remained stagnant or even been cut, finally this will change if Congress passes the Invest to Protect Act. And I'm very hopeful we can advance this bipartisan legislation soon. So with that, I'm happy to take some questions. Misty. Thank you. Misty, everybody.
Again, thank you all for being here this afternoon. I know there's a lot of other things that you could do on a Saturday afternoon that's beautiful outside other than being at a town hall. The way that this is going to run is we know that there's probably as many diverse opinions as there are people in this room. So to make everything fair and equitable so that every question can get asked, we would like to encourage you to keep your question at 1 minute and ask one question. The congressman will then get 3 minutes to answer you. He's pretty good at staying on track.
All right.
Rachel does not have a microphone. However, she is going to, she's got something to hold because of the live stream so that you can hear it. Correct, Rachel?
I do not.
It's fine? Okay.
That doesn't work over there.
No, that one's not working either. So
I can talk really loud.
So Rachel's going to shout out the numbers from your raffle ticket, and if we can just ask you to please ask your question, ask it loudly so the audience can hear. You can repeat the question to make sure everybody can hear it, and then please go back to your seat so that he can address the entire audience with the question. And at that, I think that is the...
You're good, just ignore me.
Okay. I think that's where we are, and at that point, I'm going to let Rachel tell you how she's going to ask how she's going to call the numbers and get the first people up. If you can come around and please line up on this side so you're near her, and then go back to your seat afterwards again, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, it's that time. So this is Kit. Kit and I have never met before. He doesn't know me, I don't know him. He's going to choose randomly 3 tickets. I will then read those numbers, and if you have those numbers, you will come as Misty asked and line up here. After each question, it will choose one more number, and I'll read that number. Clear? Everybody get this?
Gotcha.
Got it. Okay.
Just, you can go ahead and ask, and I'll try to...
I would have dressed a little better if I would have known I was going to be in front of a
It's all good. It's 90 degrees outside.
I just came from a rally. Well, I was going to ask about San Onofre, but you've already addressed that, so I'll switch it up with something that I was listening to on the news on the way here. And CNN's reporting about the mass shooting in Buffalo. You should have heard about that yet. They're also, and I don't know if this has been verified, CNN's reporting that the FBI has already calling it a hate crime. All I know is that it was an 18-year-old white man. I assume that's correct since it's coming from the FBI. What can you say about what your plans are for the scourge of mass shooting that's just the supermarkets, the schools, it's theaters everywhere?
Well, first of all, it's extraordinary that we keep having to have this discussion again and again and again. An issue where 80 to 90% of the American people want us to have basic background checks for guns, and Congress can't seem to get anything done. We have passed time and again since I've been in the Congress background check legislation. H.R. 8, when I first got to Congress, was named for the 8th anniversary of Congresswoman Gabby Giffords' shooting in Tucson, Arizona. I have co-sponsored additional legislation, everything from trying to deal with ghost guns, which, as you may know, now you can put together a ghost gun and it's virtually undetectable in many cases. Also an assault weapons ban. There are around 200 or so of us in the House that support that. Why can't Congress get this done? Well, there's two main reasons. One is the filibuster, right? You all have heard of the filibuster, and it rears its head again on this issue. And then ultimately, number two is the influence of big money in our political system. There are far too many members of Congress of both parties, who are influenced by the corporate gun lobby. And the reality is that whether it's big oil, big pharma, or the corporate gun lobby, we need fundamental campaign finance reform. After all these years, that's what I come to. That's the conclusion that I reach. Because if it were just popular opinion, if it were just public opinion, that would lead to congressional action. It would have been done already when you have 80+%. I am honored, I can tell you, every campaign I've ever run, every campaign, hopefully, that I ever will, to be endorsed by groups like Moms Demand Action, and the Brady campaign, and the Giffords campaign, and all the other organizations. Now, what I am trying to do, in addition to all of the above, is trying to figure out what I actually can get done. And we're reintroducing bipartisan legislation, because not all Republicans agree completely on these issues, called the Prevent Family Fire Act, that we're working on with the Brady campaign. And what that bill would do is create a tax credit for safe storage devices. We know that if you have a safe storage device in the home, it reduces the risk of gun-related accidents by 74%. So doing all we can to incentivize that is incredibly important to me. So I will continue as we try to deal with campaign finance reform, as we try to end the corrosive influence of the corporate gun lobby, to work with our partners, to work with our colleagues, our allies in this fight, and do all we can in the meantime on a bipartisan basis. But make no mistake, it's extraordinarily frustrating. And again, how many incidents will it take? I think we all know President Obama, in the wake of Sandy Hook, we thought that that finally might be the moment. The other thing, the last thing I'll mention, is that President Biden has offered and cannot secure a confirmation for an ATF director. And this is another big problem. And we've got to continue to advocate for that as well. Thank you for the question. How are you? Go right ahead. How are you?
I'm Laguna, Niguel. Excited to have you here.
Thank you.
So I know you're on Hispanic Congressional Caucus.
Yes. Isn't it obvious, everybody?
Love to hear that. I did not know that about your background until I was researching you, and I thought you'll be our congressman. So glad to have you represented Latinos in Orange County. But if you have any updates on the work you're doing, and particularly in Title 42, are you going to lift that? Where are we at with that?
Yep. Thank you. What was your name again?
Delia.
Delia. Thank you for being here. So, yes, as Delia said, I am a member of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. And you say, really? Your last name is Levin? So, yeah, my mom is Mexican-American. My dad is definitely not. It's what happens when you have a Mexican-American mom who marries a, white Jewish guy. You wind up with me. So more than once, I'll go into the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. We'll have a guest there. And they'll say, what's he doing in here? Oh, no, he's okay. He's okay. He's one of us. So let me tell it's true. Let me tell you that the issue, because of my background and because the fact that my mom's parents came from Mexico when they were very young, this is personal. This is personal. When they came here, if my mom were here, she would tell you they had no money, they didn't speak English, they didn't have any formal education. All they had was work ethic. They had work ethic and a belief that if they did everything that they could to improve themselves and their family's future, that they would have a better future here than they had in Mexico. And they sent all 5 of their daughters to college. My grandparents never graduated high school. They sent all 5 of their girls, including my mom, to college. My mom got an advanced degree. And they would never have believed that their youngest grandson would become a member of the House of Representatives. That's the America that I know. And the question that I often ask is that America even still possible? And so I am advocating for that America to still be possible, where people can still make it here if they work hard and play by the rules, which is why we need comprehensive immigration reform. Let's not lose the forest for the trees for a minute and remember that we got to go back and stop just caring about political talking points. See, too many members of Congress, I think, want the issue of immigration rather than actually trying to solve the challenges inherent with immigration. The closest they came in recent time was in the 115th Congress before I got there with the Hurd-Aguilar comprehensive proposal. Didn't quite get across the finish line. And then when I got there, we had the U.S. Citizenship Act. We've had the Dream and Promise Act to take care of our dreamers. We had the Farm Workforce Modernization Act. Both the Dream and Promise Act and the Farm Workforce Modernization Act passed the House. Again, went to the Senate, where that filibuster, again, reared its head. We then tried to get some common sense immigration provisions in the reconciliation bill. You might remember that. And the Senate parliamentarians said no, because they were not directly related to revenue or taxation, as is required by reconciliation. So here we are. Now, with Title 42, with regard to Title 42, week before last, I was at the southern border talking to CBP. And their clear guidance to me was that they did not have the resources, the personnel that they need to deal with the revocation of Title 42. You probably know that a judge in Louisiana has held it up for the time being. But if tomorrow it were to be revoked and the number were to go up to 18,000 a day, which is what some are estimating, that would be a real problem. So I am leading a letter to Mayorkas, the DHS secretary, requesting that he submit a supplemental emergency budget proposal to the Congress, because we've got to get them the resources that they need. The other thing I saw when I was at the border week before last, fentanyl. And I met with some of the top people dealing with the fentanyl crisis. And I can tell you it was shocking to hear some of the methods that the cartels are now using, because they have a huge amount of fentanyl that they are trying to get across the border. And where it used to be they would have specialized components in cars and trucks, what they told me is there are now people who are trying to get children as young as 12 years old to get fentanyl across the border. It is unconscionable. We've got to do everything we can to address it. I've sponsored, co-sponsored a multitude of legislation to try to deal with it. But in the very near term, we've got to get the resources down there that they need to do the job, because they can do the job and do it well. The overarching policy is we need immigration policy that emphasizes security, but also humanity. Humanity. Thank you very much for the question. You already got called, no? I did get called. Okay, go right ahead. Okay, all right. How are you? What's your name? I'm Jane. Jane, thanks for being here.
So happy to have you here. We're all honored. I want to circle back to the issue of climate change.
Yep.
Because as important as every single one of the topics that you've been covering is, they won't even matter if we don't have a planet. And I have been active in an organization that has been pushing for carbon pricing.
Yep.
And I don't see that popping up very often when we read a list of Biden's priorities, when he is trying to sort of reconfigure
Citizens Climate Lobby?
policies that he might, well,
No?
it's carbon fee and dividend is
Yeah.
a particular
Yeah.
policy that I'm interested in, but
Yeah.
carbon pricing of any kind would be fine. What's your position on that, and will you fight for that?
We have been and will continue to fight for that. Now, the reality, so she asked about carbon pricing and about climate policy generally and kind of where we are. So I sit on the Select Committee for the Climate Crisis and the House Natural Resources Committee, and this has been another point of great frustration because the climate crisis is not getting any easier. It's getting more difficult, and it is not theoretical for us. We just saw our firefighters, right? They told me that it used to be you'd have a couple months of peak wildfire season. Now you have a month or two where it's not peak wildfire season. We saw the drought, 1,200-year drought, the most that we've seen certainly in our lifetimes. So we need all hands on deck. We've got to dramatically reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, and we've got to do it from the cars we drive, from the way we move goods, from the buildings that we build, from the agriculture, the way that we grow food, and from the power that we need, the electricity that we need to do all of the above. And we've got to do it fast. So I don't want to double down on the dirty energy policies of the past. I want to skate to where the puck will be in 20 years. And I want for this region to be a hub of clean tech growth and development. I want our major research universities to be right in the midst of all of that. You know, I am honored, our district, we've got some of the best climate scientists in the world right here in our district. And you deserve a representative that will actually listen to them and then act in a manner that is commensurate with the science. So what does all that mean? Practically, what it means. What we had in our reconciliation bill this past year, which the senator from West Virginia put a stop to in mid-December, was a $555 billion investment in clean energy, in tax policy for solar and wind and electric vehicles and battery storage and all sorts of other policies that we desperately need to reduce our greenhouse gas footprint, many of which were modeled directly after the report that I helped with from the Select Committee in the prior Congress. That was the roadmap, the foundation for much of that work. And where it stands today is we are still trying. We are still trying to work with Senator Manchin. My team is trying to work with Senator Manchin. Everybody's trying to work with Senator Manchin. And we need to get to yes. We need to get to yes because it's too important. It's too significant. I look at this, and I think Chrissy does too, my wife does too, through the lens of our kids. They are 9 and 8. We're very privileged. We get to live by a beautiful ocean. We have to protect our ocean, our air, our water. But it goes beyond just pollution. It's about being able to live in this community when they're our age or when we have grandkids. So I will not stop fighting. It is a big reason I ran. It is a big reason I serve. And it is a big reason I continue to run because we've got a lot of work to do and we're just getting started. Thank you very much for the question. How are you?
I'm well. Hi, my name is Leslie from St. Clemente, and my question is about expanding the Supreme Court. I think you checked recently. Have you co-sponsored the bill to do that?
I have not, because I am waiting for the results of the President's Commission and the recommendations that will come from that to figure out what we can do that will actually pass. It is important that we, what's that? I hope it comes out soon. I think at the end of the day, right now we have a 6-3 Supreme Court where, let's take it back to 2016, right? Well, think about how we got to where we are today. President Obama, in his last year, he appointed or nominated Merrick Garland for confirmation, and Mitch McConnell said that he would not confirm in the last year of President Obama's second term, with about 10 months to go. And then, after the election, they got Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and then with only a few months left, less time than was left in Obama's second term, we obviously, Justice Ginsburg passed away, and then they rushed Amy Coney Barrett to the bench. And so the hypocrisy, even for Mitch McConnell, that's a lot of hypocrisy, even for Mitch McConnell. This has been a long-term project of theirs. Now, I would like to see, there are a lot of different discussions around there. I would like to be able to see what we actually can get across the finish line in the House and the Senate, whether it is term limits, whether it is other ideas. to be determined, but the reality is that elections matter, right? If there's one message that I have for you right now, Leslie, it's that elections matter. Who you elect as the next president of the United States in 2024 matters a great deal. And when you read Alito's decision, the Hobbs decision, I think the key is that it tracks back to Griswold versus Connecticut, a 1965 decision that's directly related to the Liberty Clause of the 14th Amendment. And that Liberty Clause is the basis for a lot of other things, that rights that we take for granted. LGBTQ equality, not just the right to marry, the right for LGBTQ equality at all, contraception, in vitro fertilization, and make no mistake, Alito has said, again, the quiet part out loud in that opinion, right? Yes, and the fact that they want to talk about the leak and not the decision, I think is indicative of the fact that the decision is so wildly and indefensibly out of the mainstream. And we all need to come together and make sure that our friends, our neighbors, they know that. Thank you. Hi, how are you? What's your name?
Levin. Might look a little familiar, probably not. My wife and I had the opportunity to meet you in D.C.
Oh, cool.
Years ago. You have another congresswoman that works very close with you. I'm her brother-in-law. This is her sister, Nanette Benegan.
No way. Wait, where's Annette's sister? Hey, how are you? Oh, that's fantastic. Very cool. We were just at dinner together earlier this week with some...
Yeah, we were at the caucus,
Yeah.
Hispanic caucus years ago. So
How about that? It's fantastic.
Question for you, and a question for the audience. First of all, how many people here are retirees on Social Security?
Oh, wow.
Okay, so this is going to probably impact a lot of these people. It's something that's really been eating at us. We are both recipients of Social Security. Well, I'm a recipient of Social Security, haven't paid into the system as long as we have. All of us were shell-shocked when we received our new revised premium because of this unproven Alzheimer's drug.
Yep.
That they just rushed through, and we all subsidized that increased premium. There's been such a backlash and an uproar over this passage and the increase of the premium that now everybody in Washington is having second thoughts of maybe we should reevaluate this.
Right.
My question is, why was it allowed to just be pushed through? We all saw a big increase in our premiums in Social Security, and now all of a sudden everybody did not do their due diligence, are now saying, hey, maybe we better research this.
Yeah. Well, I think it was a bad bureaucratic decision, and I know that the House Energy and Commerce Committee has been and will continue to investigate. Nanette serves on it, by the way, and they're the committee of jurisdiction in this instance. But Biogen, the company behind it, I believe the drug is called Aduhelm. They've had, obviously a huge impact on premiums, and it's outrageous. It's absolutely outrageous. So I know for a fact that there are many of my colleagues who are directly addressing this. So I would stay tuned, and I would talk. It's your sister-in-law?
Yes.
Okay, you got to talk to your sister-in-law. Now, let me say something more broadly about Social Security. So when I saw those hands go up in the room, I immediately thought about what Rick Scott recently put in writing. Do you all know about this? All right. So let me take a step back. I don't mean to pick on Mitch McConnell today, but I'm going to say another thing about Mitch McConnell. He was asked, McConnell was interviewed maybe, I don't know, 4 months ago, 5 months ago, if you become the majority leader, what is your agenda? And he said, I'll tell you when we win. That's what he said, right? Rick Scott went a little further and again said the quiet part out loud, and he came out with something called the 11-point plan to rescue America, I think it was called. And Rick Scott is not just any senator. Rick Scott is the guy that Donald Trump wants to be the majority leader of the Senate. Rick Scott runs something called the National Republican Senatorial Committee, the NRSC, that runs the Senate elections for the Republicans across the country. This is not some random senator. He comes up with this 11-point plan, and it says, among other things, that in effect, they will sunset Social Security, along with Medicare and Medicaid, every 5 years. Every 5 years. They will allow the expiration of those social safety net programs and then revisit them. Right? Does that sound like a good idea to you? No. Now, we all acknowledge that we've got to do all we can to shore up Social Security's finances in the long term. The difference is that we actually have a bill to do it, the Social Security 2100 Act, that I have proudly co-sponsored since I've gotten to the Congress. And guess what? The other side, you know what they're going to do? First of all, most of them won't tell you, but they're going to do what Rick Scott says. They're going to want to revisit Social Security. We saw when President George W. Bush was reelected, what did we see? Privatization. Privatization. Remember, he said, this in right after the 2004 election, said, I have a mandate. And then they went to try to privatize right after that. So that's what's coming. They are telling you. It is like Maya Angelou, the quote, when someone tells you who they are, believe them the first time. This really matters. That's why you've got to get out and vote. You've got to get out and tell your friends to vote. Will you do that? Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, these are 251 and 249. 251 and 249.
All right. Come on down. Now, you were at our house party this morning, so you're not sick of me today. Uh-huh.
My question is, not the current inflation causes, but what are we doing? Because in the history of this country, every time we stumble into significant inflation, the Federal Reserve gets on the big office, starts pushing interest rates way up and up. And when the causes of inflation are not due to spending too much, so we're not spending too much on food or gasoline, prices keep going up. It's happening when you increase interest rates. So you foster the beginnings of secondary inflation. It's been the last years, not centuries. So back in the 1970s, when we went into the exact same different causes, interest rates got pushed up with the youth communities. And the deficit at the time was called over. Where did they end up? 13% mortgage rates. And 23% general interest rates. So over the next 9 years, the economy was devastated. And this has happened several times. And now, there are a few regions to the cause, waiting to see if all these reforms and programs will reduce some of this inflation. They're launching increased interest rates. And working in industry, a variety of retailers, inventory control and purchasing, familiar with the costs of product, distribution and transportation. And with the increase of gas, we're going to see spotty price increases everywhere.
Mhm.
As companies try to recoup the extra costs.
Mhm.
So the question is, what reins control from the top
Well, the
Reserve?
the Fed was
Stay reasonable.
obviously instrumental in past recessions, and you can make the economic argument that we should do more, should do less. Ultimately, it's up to Chairman Powell, who was, and I'm not a senator. They just renominated him, confirmed him. I believe the vote was 81 to 19, something like that, broad bipartisan support. So the ball is in his court. I watched some of his confirmation last week. I think he's, obviously, he's under the microscope right now. Every action they take is under the microscope. But at the end of the day, I think he fully understands a lot of what happened in the past, and that'll help inform him in the future. I said at the outset what I am doing in the Congress as your representative to do all I can to bring costs down for the average person, whether it's at the gas station, at the grocery store, or otherwise. I think it's vitally important that we pass this Bipartisan Innovation Act, which will address things like semiconductors and microchips that make up about 1/3 of the inflation that we've seen. And I'll continue to do everything I can to address inflation with the same sort of commitment with which we have addressed COVID, because ultimately the economic crisis from COVID is something that we are still getting over from. And as I said before, between the pandemic, between the war in Ukraine, and between the activities of some of these companies, including to but not limited to big oil, those are the root causes that we need to address, and I'm committed to doing everything I can in the Congress to doing just that. So I thank you for the question. How are you?
Okay, I'm doing fine.
What's your name?
Kelly.
Kelly, how are you?
I'm doing fine. I'm a patent attorney,
Oh, wow.
and I worked with big corporations for most of my legal career. And so I can suck the energy out of a room really fast. I do want to ask you a question. There's HR 5874, and I'm sure you're familiar with it at least. It's sponsored by Thomas Massey, and it's co-sponsored by McClintock. So it's
Okay.
got some nonsense in it, okay? But the basis is pretty interesting. Now, you talked about the Innovation Act, so, corollary to that is protecting the people that invent.
Yep.
Things here's my basic experience has been in the corporate world. But
Yep.
since I left that world, now I'm working with small startups. That's my entire client
Yep.
base is
Yep.
people from here in our community district. And we have some extremely bright people.
Yep. Yep.
People that started somewhere else and came back in. People like Rivian and Cincinnati
Yep.
and all these companies that are out there. So 5874 is intended to kind of reverse the America Invents Act that was passed in 2011. And I don't know how much of this floats up to you, but that has really hurt small inventors. And the reason is, well, I'll let you, I'm sure you have some thoughts about it.
Well, what I would say, Kelly, is I think the best thing to do is if I could get your information after this town hall, we can set up a chat with my staffer who works specifically on IP-related issues. I can tell you I absolutely want to support innovative small businesses who are trying to compete. I think it's really cool what you do, actually. Not boring at all, because protecting... No, but... Hey, man, I'm trying to throw you a bone here. But protecting the rights of innovators is extremely important to me, having worked at least a couple startup companies myself over the years. So whatever we can do to work together with you on it, I'd love to do that. All right? Thank you. Thanks, Kelly. Thank you. Okay, let's make sure we get Kelly's info. Hi, how are you?
Kevin Finney, I'm happy to be a new voter in your district.
Fantastic, Kevin. Thank you. Thank you.
When I watch the news and think about the state of our country, the issue that makes me want to pull my hair out and maybe go in a closet and scream a little is the sort of two-pronged attack that's taking place on the integrity of our elections.
Yeah.
States that are eroding voting rights, and at the same time, stop to steal people who are trying to take over offices and administer elections with, a desire to not guarantee the integrity of those elections, but
Yep.
quite the opposite. The other thing that frustrates me about all this is the inability of the Senate
Yeah.
to unite, Senate Democrats to unite and take action on this.
Yeah.
Can you give me any hopeful signs? Do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, I'm just as frustrated as you. I'm very frustrated that on voting rights, whether it's the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, the For the People Act, Senator Manchin's pared back version of it, none of it seems to be able to get the requisite votes in the Senate, and unfortunately the senators do not seem willing or able to have a carve-out for voting rights, civil rights, women's rights, any rights from the filibuster, which President Obama correctly identified as a Jim Crow relic. If anybody wants to really know the history of the filibuster, I recommend the book Kill Switch by Adam Gentleson. It is an excellent, excellent book. Gentleson was a Hill staffer for many years and wrote about the history. The bottom line is it's not what you think. It's not what some have said. It's not like the founders sat around and said, gee, we really need to block majority votes and we just need a filibuster to just make everything really hard to do in the Senate. They never said that. They never said that. So where do we go from here? Well, I do think that there is momentum behind reform for the Electoral Count Act. You recall that that came up. That was a hugely important issue in the last presidential election. But it doesn't go far enough. It doesn't go far enough. So the best thing that we can do, and it's not just on voting rights, although I think it's really important on voting rights, but on civil rights, on women's rights, on LGBTQ rights, you name it, gun violence prevention, all the things we've talked about. Number one thing, elect a couple more Democratic senators. That's what we can do. Because if you had 51 or you had 52, I'd like 52, then you wouldn't have any one or two senators being able to play king or queen. And that is what we need. So when I look around, I've got some good friends in the House who are running for Senate. My friend Tim Ryan in Ohio, he's going to give J.D. Vance all he can handle. My friend Val Demings, I think she's got a great chance against Rubio. And then we've got to make sure that Catherine Cortez Masto in Nevada, Raphael Warnock in Georgia, Mark Kelly in Arizona, that they all win their races. We can do it. We can do it because the political pundits, their very premature obituary, I think will be proven wildly wrong come November. With your help. Thank you.
And Congressman, yes, this gentleman is going to be your last question.
Yeah. Dr. Mike Schmidt from Dana Point. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, let me just finish very quickly. So for those of you, because we do have some tickets left, for those of you who didn't get your question asked, if you could please send it to townhall@mikelevin.org, we will make sure to get the question asked for you. It may take some time, but it will get answered. So at that now, and
thank you.
And because you won't listen to me in a few minutes when everybody's done, there's a comment card, an evaluation card on your seats. If you could please fill it out, because I really do read all of those and try to make improvements from your suggestions. You don't have to tell me that it was hot in here. I was fully aware of that. And the problem with the microphone, I am fully aware of that as well. So aside from that, any other suggestions you have, we always try to make it better and do read all of your comments. So now, I will turn it back over.
Mike came prepared. He's dressed for the 90 degrees. It's good to see you. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for allowing me to lobby you and request on nonpartisan issues and acting on some of those issues. I appreciate that. And my question I came with was mostly water related, kind of nonpartisan. I enjoy water.
Yeah.
But in your comments about the Ukraine war, as you also know, I know more than I should about world affairs, and you've taken some of my advice on world affairs, so I'm going to kind of couch this from a world affairs, but also a spending issue. The $40 billion to Ukraine is egregious. That amount of money. The issues there are not intractable, but in my personal opinion, I feel we're throwing money at people for the last Ukrainian die. I'm against Russia's actions, but I feel it's a waste of money and treasure for what's going to be a Rome state. And $40 billion is a lot of money. I would love to see, and I've seen estimates on this, a pipeline. I know you don't like pipelines. A water pipeline bringing Mississippi water to our water system, feeding into the Colorado. I'm informed that that could be as low as $12 billion. I'd love to see Ukrainian aid go for humanitarian work, but to continue this war is going to be a ceaseless, tragic loss of life, father.
Yeah.
So I'd like to comment on your willingness to accept funding for that versus.
Well, a couple things. One is when you break down the 40, and I genuinely appreciate your comments, and I'm very grateful to get your feedback, and we'll continue to have that. As long as I have the opportunity to serve, I appreciate your feedback. A lot of the $40 billion is to recover money, specifically to backfill weapons that we've already sent. That's several $billion. About $25 billion is military. About $15 billion goes to state and other humanitarian relief. I'd be interested, perhaps we could go line by line. Probably not right now, But just to kind of to understand where you think the cut should be, because obviously, as I said at the outset, I think there's strong bipartisan support for trying to do all we can to stop Putin, and the projections have been all over the place from the beginning of this. I think you all know, and it was publicly reported, the original intelligence that we received as members of Congress was that Putin was going to take Kyiv in 72 hours. And they were completely wrong about that. And what we saw was this extraordinary bravery from the average Ukrainian stepping up and saying, we're not going to allow our country to be destroyed by a war criminal. Subsequent, we've seen just unbelievable, disgraceful human rights violations, war crimes, unlike anything in my lifetime. And I appreciate that perspective. No, I appreciate that perspective, Mike. For me, when I saw a building marked as children, for Putin to then, and for his army to then go after and destroy that building, or when I saw what they did at the train station where people were trying to get out to Poland to see that indiscriminately destroyed, and then the lies and the misrepresentations that are coming daily from Putin and his regime, we cannot stand for it, because for me, it's about the entire international order since World War II really hanging in the balance, and whether or not autocracy or democracy will be the prevailing form of government for the rest of our lifetimes, and more importantly for Abby's lifetime, for my kids' lifetime. What is this going to look like when they are our age? And I want to make sure that democracy prevails. That's certainly why my grandpa fought in World War II to defeat fascism. So to the water question, it's an interesting concept. I'm all about diversification and resiliency, also recognizing that would be really hard to do from a siting and permitting perspective. But make no mistake, there's a great series of books that have been written about just how difficult it is to have a long-term water supply for Southern California. I'm on the Water, Oceans, and Wildlife Subcommittee of Natural Resources, and what I've tried to do is advocate for resilience, for recycling, for desal, for anything we can do to try to push the envelope on getting more water, recognizing full well that we can't keep doing what we're doing. I'm proud of at least a couple projects that we've gotten money for. One in Oceanside, where they're now doing the Pure Water project. They're getting about 20% of the city's water. Oceanside is the biggest city in our district. About 20% from recycled water. I'd love for it to be a higher number than that, but still, that's a good number. And we got $7 million in federal funding to help with that. And then Doheny, now she cut me. Is that my 3 minutes are up? Sorry, I thought it was Misty. I thought my 3 minutes were up. We're trying to get in Doheny Beach, they have the South Coast Water District. They want to do a 3 million gallon desal plant. Now, to the extent you've read in the news a lot about Huntington Beach, I think the biggest difference is that at Doheny, we've got the need right there. South Coast Water District could use that water with 3 million gallons a day. So I've done all I can to support that. So I'd love to have a broader discussion about water policy, because I love it too. I really do. By the way, I just saw somebody in the back that you all need to know. Stephanie Otto is running for Laguna, Niguel City Council. You've got to support her. I'm grateful for her being here. I'm grateful for all of you being here. If you watched, and you've watched for the last hour and a half streaming, wow, thank you so much. We'll be doing another one of these every month for as long as I have the opportunity to serve. And with that, have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Thank you, everybody.